everybody. Welcome to Circling the Bases, kind of. It is a special kind of episode where we're going to be answering your baseball questions, and we're also going to be opening up some baseball cards. I'm opening up one box of 2021 Topps Pro Debut Baseball. It's one of my favorite sets. It's not necessarily the most fancy or certainly not the most expensive, but it's a chance to get a lot of prospects, not rookie cards, but prospects, and you also get 4 autographs in it. So it's a pretty cool little thing. Feel free to ask any questions that you have about prospects, that you have about, anything going on baseball wise. I know not a lot is technically going on with the lockout, but you're getting ready to set rosters. Your fantasy stuff is still going on. So if you have any questions, do let me know in the chat. We'll talk about the prospects as we kind of open up the cards as well. So be a lot of fun. We've had fun doing this all year, and definitely not stopping anytime soon. So that'll be fun. Just noticed I've got 3 different Seattle things going on in my background. You see the Griffey, you see the Seattle Kraken, you see the Washington Huskies. You can definitely tell where I'm from. Hope everybody's having a good winter. I know it's frustrating right now to have no baseball stuff going on right now. It's actually a really busy time for us because we're getting ready for our magazine stuff at NBC Sports EDGE, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, it's a crazy time. So let's get started. It is 24 packs and you get 8 packs per box. So hopefully having it set up where you can actually watch me open the cards a little bit. I know that you can't really accuse me of cheating or anything like that, but yeah. Start off Asa Lacy, the guy who pitched pretty well in the Arizona Fall League. Kind of a disappointing first season with the Royals after being drafted that high, but still very high hopes, just maybe not the fast track prospect that we were thinking about. This is a guy I think is a fast track prospect, and that's Corbin Carroll. Even with the injury last year, plus speed, a chance to really hit for average, good chance for power as well. Big fan of him. And I'm loving the design of these cards. I like that they have a little bit of everything going on. P.D. Halpin, similar profile, kind of to a poor man's Corbin Carroll, really. A player that I like a lot. Cleveland has not done necessarily well with this type of profile, but certainly a name that I'm keeping an eye on. And we have our first autograph. That's interesting. Tyler Gentry. Gentry's kind of a 4th outfield prospect to me. He's got a chance to maybe, if everything goes right, to develop into a starter, but I see more of a 4th outfielder type guy. I always like looking at the age of these guys. Turns 23 in February. So not a massive hit by any stretch of the imaginations, but can see him developing. Has a fairly high floor. So that's an interesting little prospect. Jared Schuster, prospect who was a surprise first-round pick to me, but Atlanta, talk about a system that does really well with these type of prospects. That is for sure. And then it's just some base. But let's talk about this guy real quick, Mackenzie Gore, because I know, and again, I have to get used to the inverted camera, but Mackenzie Gore is enigma is probably too strong of a word, but man, I don't know what to expect from him. I got some very mixed reports from him in the Arizona Fall League. I didn't get a chance to see him when I was down there, unfortunately. I'm still holding on in dynasty leagues and stuff like that, but expectations definitely need to get lowered because I think we're talking more mid-rotation guy than top of the rotation. Still very young, still got a chance to, I think, be a helper, but no longer anything close to the sure thing that we thought he was just a couple of years ago. So that was fun first pack. All right, let's see. Just kind of pull out the ones that are interesting here. Joe Collins, international signing. Really good athlete, has a chance to hit for average. Some question marks about the power. I imagine that he'll be like a guy that the Royals look to add some loft to his swing, but interesting athlete, a buy low type of prospect for sure. Antonio Gomez. The Yankees are kind of loaded with catching prospects right now. There's a lot of guys who I think could be starters someday. Gomez is the furthest away, but I think Gomez does have a chance to be a starter someday in Yankee prospects. If you're talking about investing in prospects, they always do well. Jordan Belazovic, a super underrated, I think, pitching prospect right now. Has dealt with some injuries, dealt with some results stuff too. He hasn't been exactly an elite starter when he's been on the mound, but I think he has the stuff to be a starter and a really good one. And I imagine Minnesota's going to give him a chance this year. So that's definitely an interesting guy. Oh, this guy's fairly interesting. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. His name is Julio Rodriguez. Am I pronouncing that? I'm just kidding. He might be the best prospect in baseball. I still think it's so. The best real life prospect in baseball, in my opinion, is Adley Rutschman. The best fantasy prospect in baseball is Bobby Witt Jr. If you combine the two, I think you could probably go Julio Rodriguez. Like he's going to be second on my list. Spoiler alert for the top 100 that comes out for the magazine. I just, he looks like, look, Jared Kelenic struggled. I understand. And some people might be wondering if he's the same type of thing. It's not. And also, Jared Kelenic was so much better at the end of the year as well. But man, this is a guy who has star potential and will rank very high on lists for a long time. That's kind of a fun one. Ryan Howard, obviously not a prospect anymore. Doesn't play baseball anymore, but cool looking card. A guy who, if the shift didn't exist, probably would have maybe been a Hall of Famer. So we talk about this guy a lot, it seems like, because he seems to just show up in our card stuff. But let's talk about Reed Detmers for a second, because I think it's worth pointing out again that this is a prospect that in real life I like a lot, because he's going to throw a ton of strikes. He's going to initiate weak contact. I think he's going to be a very solid fantasy starter. I have some real doubts about him becoming a fantasy ace. I just don't think he's going to strike out enough guys to do it. I don't see it. I certainly think he's nice. Certainly think he could be better than a streamer. But if you're expecting him to become a fantasy ace, I just think you're expecting too much. I do. The strikeout totals he put up in the minors, super impressive. But I think a lot of that was just based on the fact that he can manipulate the baseball really well and he can locate really well. And you get a lot of strikeouts with location in the minor leagues, not as much in the majors. All right, let's see here. Here's a guy who really struggled this year, but I'm still pretty high on him. Nolan Jones for Cleveland, the Guardians now. I got to get used to saying that. Happy to be saying it, but definitely got to get used to saying it. Really good approach at the plate. Maybe too good of approach. I think he might have to become a little bit more aggressive. There's you got to give pitchers a reason to throw you quality strikes. And look, it's great to be patient, and he certainly has good power, and he's willing to use the whole field. But when you're constantly hitting in 2 strike counts, it's not great. It's not great. It's going to lead to the power's really going to have to play. It's very nice to have that 370, 380 on base percentage. If you're hitting 220 with it, especially in fantasy stuff, it's not quite the same type of profile. Good defender, not a great defender, but certainly good enough. All right, let's see here. Oh, here's a number. Oh, it's a numbered auto. And this is a guy, I got to be honest with you, I don't know a heck of a lot about. Michael Mcaveeney. This is very rare that I'm stumped, and I wouldn't say completely stumped because I've certainly heard a little bit about him. But this is a rare case where I am not 100% going to be what I'm talking about here. Born August 24th, 1997, so a little bit of an older prospect. Closed at Louisville, if I'm remembering correctly. It was one of the ACC schools, so potential middle relief type of thing, but always nice to get an autograph with a low number. The orange is always pretty, so that's fun. Let's see. Another really good prospect here, Elvi Marte. And again, I have no bias towards the Seattle Mariners other than wanting them to win for my grandma. But I do get a chance to talk about them a lot because of where I live. Could be the best shortstop prospect in baseball at this point next year. Like, just has all of the tools necessary to be strong. If again, in fantasy, in the card market, what have you, go get Elvi Marte right now because the value is going to skyrocket if he puts up these same type of numbers that he did at the AA level, which is where I imagine he's going to be heading to. Let's see here. Owen Casey, a part of the Yu Darvish trade, a Canadian-born player, I believe. Let's make sure I'm not talking out of my you-know-what again. Yep, Ontario. Good power. Pretty good athlete. Could see him being a nice starting corner outfielder someday. Some work to be done for sure. And he's a young player, so there's plenty of time for that. But I could see him developing into a starting outfielder for sure. All right. I really like the looks of these cards. I like the design. I like that there is not a sameness to it. Like there's a little bit of a different look to most of the cards. It gets kind of boring when you're just looking at the same design over and over and over again. Jeremy De La Rosa, a guy who had his first Bowman come out this year. A long-term prospect. The numbers don't look pretty. Um, Washington has done a pretty darn good job of developing prospects like this, for the most part anyway. There are some exceptions to the rule, as there is for most teams. But definitely a long-term hold type of guy. Probably not a guy you're going to see until 2024, but certainly has some talent. Carson Tucker, uh, first round pick, probably didn't deserve to be a first round pick, if I'm being completely honest with you. Some question marks about where he's going to play ultimately. Not a huge amount of offensive upside, but a solid all around player. And I could see developing into a starter, probably at second base instead, but certainly not a bad pickup if you're looking into that stuff. Here's a guy that I really like that just hasn't quite panned out yet, and Travis Swegerty of the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was one of the top 3 players in that draft to me, coming out of South Alabama. Has really struggled to put anything together offensively since then. It's been kind of usurped. Pittsburgh has a really good system right now. But I'm not giving up on Travis Swegerty yet. Let's see, date of birth. We are talking. So he turned 24 this year. So time's running out a little bit here. But I still think he can develop into a starting outfielder. May need a change of organizations, but a guy that I still believe can be a solid option for somebody someday. Just hasn't hit. Him and Corey Ray are 2 of the prospects that I've kind of been the most wrong on, and it happens. Hopefully it doesn't happen again, but it happens. Daniel Lynch, this guy really struggled in those first couple of starts, and I get why people were pretty low on him, and for 2021, I definitely get why people gave up on him. He's actually pretty solid after a second call-up. I just finished doing a write-up for him on the magazine, and I still like him a lot long term. It's tough to recommend him as an option for 2022 because I think the Royals are going to be pretty bad again next year, and also like he needs to make a significant step up from what we saw in order for him to have fantasy relevance. But in dynasty and stuff, Daniel Lynch is still absolutely a hold, because at this point last year he was a top 25 prospect, not just for pitchers, like top 25 overall. Top 30 maybe. But either way, Daniel Lynch is somebody that I would not give up on in the long term. Hey, this is a fun one. Wander Franco. Wander Franco has more money than me. A lot more money than me, if I'm being completely honest with you. And he's deserved. Like, what he did last year at the age of 20, playing for a legitimate title contending team, is super underrated. And if I would have had the vote for Rookie of the Year, I would have voted for him, because even with his salary being suppressed until the middle of the summer, and let's be honest, that's exactly what happened. Even with that, he was still the most impactful player, I think, among rookies. All due respect to his teammate, Randy Arozarena, who had a very strong, basically third rookie year. It's still weird to me that he was eligible, but very strong year. But Wander Franco, I mean, he has a chance to be one of, if not the best players in baseball. And I don't say that lightly. I really don't. Well, that's fun. We just talked about him, but our auto is Owen Casey. It's a nice third auto. Absolutely. I really like the design of these cards too. It's got an old school feel to it, but it's the newness of a prospect. That's my favorite thing. Is combining the old and the new. Nostalgia. I'm a sucker for it. Garrett Mitchell. It's still crazy to me that this guy fell as low as he did in that draft. I want to say it was 19th pick. We can look at the card and see if they tell me. It just says number 1 draft pick, which means he was a first round pick. But there were concerns about the diabetes stuff, and I guess there were more concerns too about the power. And look, I don't expect him to be a 30 homer guy, but he can hit, man. He can really hit. He can steal bases. He can play defense. Garrett Mitchell is a stud. I really expect him to be a well above average starting outfielder someday. Maybe even get a chance to play for the Brew Crew in 2022. I like him a lot. Here's a guy I did get to see in Arizona, Bobby Miller. Big fan. Like, Los Angeles just does so well with these type of prospects, but It looks like they got a real steal. Touching 98, 3 above average secondary pitches. I could see him being dominant in relief if they went that route. But I would try to make him a starter and then make that move after if necessary. And I didn't see anything in Arizona that suggested that move will be necessary. I think he can pitch at or near the top of a rotation someday. Really, really underrated prospect. Maybe a top 50 prospect that'll end up on my list coming in the magazine. I like talking about the magazine. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry at all. It's a fun thing to talk about. Let's see here. Nick Gonzalez. So Nick Gonzalez really struggled for a middle point of the season. But if you take that out, his numbers are ridiculous. Like he still ended up the year, I want to say right around a 900 OPS, which is a very strong first season. But he had a straight. He went like 1 for 40 or something like that. That really kind of skewed the numbers a little bit. But I get that there's some concerns with his swing is not exactly picturesque. He can be kind of late getting his wrist through the zone. But I think he's going to be able to hit for average and power. And I think he's going to play a solid second base. I really like Nick Gonzalez. It was silly that we were talking about him being a top 3 pick and excuse me, in the last draft. But definitely a guy who I think is going to be well above average at his position. So let's see. Oh, that's pretty. It's the blue version of the Bobby Miller. Again, guy I like quite a bit. Here's another guy that really struggled in his professional debut, in Aaron Sabato, but showed a really good approach at the plate. A lot of North Carolina hitters, I think, and I've seen it happen more than once. I know this for sure. Kind of struggle out of the gate, and I think some of it has to do with the fact that maybe they are a little too patient. And Sabato certainly is a very patient hitter, but he has that plus power. I think he's going to be able to hit, maybe not for average, but I think he's going to draw walks and hit for power and play adequate enough defense at first base to be a starter someday. I wouldn't give up on him just based on his struggles from that season. Let's see, anybody else interesting here? Yeah. George Kirby. So George Kirby was intriguing before the velocity increased because he just threw strikes. Like he threw strikes as well as I think any first round prospect or any prospect from his draft. Then he started throwing 98, and that intrigues it a lot. I think George Kirby has a chance to be a starter for the Mariners, maybe as soon as early next year. Again, assuming we get a season starting early next season, of course. But yeah, a guy I absolutely like a lot. Let's see here. Anybody fun in this one? Not really, but a couple that I'll talk about. Blaze Jordan. Blaze Jordan is a better card hold to me than an actual prospect, if I'm being completely honest with you. I like him. I certainly get why he is a popular prospect, being the Boston Red Sox guy and being a YouTube kind of sensation type of thing. His YouTube videos are very interesting. You can definitely go check those out after you watch this video. And then, he can hit. I think the power's coming, and I think that he's got decent shots to hit for average, decent defender at third base. I think the hype is a little overstated, but certainly a prospect that I like. Prospect I really liked coming into the year, but just didn't hit at all. Braden Shoemake of the Braves. Still believer long term. I think looking at like the metrics and stuff, some bad luck. Not certainly a guy whose stock slid. You can't deny that when you don't hit, that you have to take a little bit of a slide. But I can still see him developing into a starter someday. So a little bit of a hold there on Braden Shoemake. Prospect development is not linear. There are going to be guys who have off years that end up bouncing back, and you want to look at a buy low guy. I think Braden Shoemake is definitely one of those type of guys. Ooh, that's a pretty little insert. Wonder Franco Power. That's a really pretty card. Really pretty card. Yeah, I like that a lot. You can check out the back here. I'm sorry for dirty fingernails. Yeah, really cool looking card for a really, really good player. Like really good player. Here's a fun one. Royce Lewis. Got to get used to that inverted. I'm still not used to it. Royce Lewis, first overall pick a couple of years ago, really struggled on the field in the 2019 season. Didn't get a chance to play in 2020 for reasons that are obvious, and then 2021 didn't get a chance to play because of injury. So there's just as much risk as reward here, but there's a lot of reward here. This is still a player with plus power, with plus speed, assuming that he's still the same runner. I still like him a lot. It's just hard for me to give up on a prospect like that. Risk, lots and lots of risk, but I think that risk comes with a lot of reward too. Let's see here. Anybody else interesting? Nope. Here's a kind of interesting one. Evan Carter. Drafted as was a catcher, but immediately moved to the outfield. Guy I knew absolutely nothing about coming into that draft, but then the reports immediately were really impressive. So in his first professional season, but definitely a buy low candidate there. Like Evan Carter quite a bit. All right, Nick Gonzalez, which we already talked about. Talk about a guy whose stock really improved. Cade Cavalli. Was way too advanced for the level he was at to begin the season, but that stuff's legit. Like there are swing and miss pitches in that arsenal. My only question about him is if he's going to throw enough strikes to be a frontline starter. It's tough for me with that stuff that he has, as long as he has 45 command, me seeing him not be a solid back end guy. But if he can throw, if that command can get to 50 or maybe even 55, and it's not unheard of for a guy to make that big of an adjustment with that little of experience, he's got a chance to be a top of the rotation guy. Definitely a guy I'm considering for my top 50. A lot to like. This guy will definitely be in my top 50, and I think he's one of the most underrated prospects in baseball. Tyler Freeman. I don't know if he's ever going to hit for even a semblance of power. I think he might move to second base. But that hit tool is 70, and someday it might be 80. Like I love that swing. He just makes so much consistent contact. Maybe he's a swing change guy that adds more power and drops some average a little bit. At this point, I don't think that's what's going to happen, but I didn't think that about Luis Arias either. And look at what he is now. Way different player than we expected in the minors. So yeah, that's a really, really, really nice prospect that I think is going to get a lot of time for Cleveland and will probably rank. If he's not in the top 10 prospects for 2022 for me, he'll rank in that just missed area. And if I forget that, you go ahead and call me out on it. Let's see, anybody else interesting? This is kind of a bummer. Miguel Amaya, one of the better catching prospects in baseball, but is going to miss significant time after undergoing Tommy John surgery. Still with some mixed results as well. So kind of, I don't want to say that the career is over by any stretch of the imagination because he's too young and he's too talented, but a guy who it's now a very big uphill battle is the nice way for me to say that, I guess. Let's see. Yep, that's a good little pack. A lot of repeats in this set. I'm noticing that. But that's okay. In fact, Cade Cavalli is the first card up here. Tyler Freeman is the second one. Gage Workman, another interesting prospect. The Tigers are kind of loaded with corner infield prospects right now. I think he's got a chance to be a solid utility player, but if he changed organizations, I could see him maybe developing into a starter. Maybe a guy who could play second base if you really, really, really don't have a shift and really worked on stuff. But yeah, solid prospect. Here's another insert. Austin Hendricks, power. Definitely has power, that's for sure. Not a great first professional season, but a lot of young, talented players don't have great first professional seasons, and there was a reason he was drafted with. If it wasn't a top 10 pick, it was pretty darn close. But yeah, I still like Austin Hendrick, but not a fast track prospect by any stretch of the imagination. But this guy is. Max Meyer is definitely a fast track prospect, and one I would not be shocked if we saw in Miami by the end of the season. Only hesitancy I have there really is the fact that Miami has so many pitching prospects or so many young players that um, that's my only question mark is whether or not there's going to be room at the end for him to pitch. But that stuff is legit. Like there are three swing and miss pitches, two of them near the top of the scales in his fastball and slider. My buddy RJ Anderson nicknamed him the Murder Hornet. I love that nickname for him because he's really does. He attacks you, and that stuff is legit. And he's also not the biggest guy in the world. So that's the one concern is like can he handle 170, 180 innings? But stuff is super good. As probably just a notch below Grayson Rodriguez and Hunter Green for the best pure stuff of any pitching prospect right now. Let's see. Vidal Bruhan is a guy we've kind of talked about quite a bit. Was not good in his major league debut, but also got so little of a chance to play. Just you can't base anything off of, I think it was 29 at bats. Don't judge a player by 29 at bats. There's just way too little of a sample size there. And his track record of stealing bases, hitting for a decent average means more than those 29 at bats. For him to reach his ceiling, though, I think he may need to change organizations. So if he's a guy who gets traded at some point, definitely be on the lookout. Oh, this is a fun one. This is a little insert. This is called Major Scale, and it's Riley Green. I really like Riley Green. He will rank very high, not only on my top list for prospects in 2022, but also rank very highly for my list of prospects for overall. He's just kind of a notch below Julio Rodriguez for outfield prospect. And I expect Green will get the chance to graduate sooner because he's already played in AAA. Hit for average, hit for power, provide some steals as well. A lot to like about Riley Green. I think he's got a chance to be a very, very good one. Josiah Gray. So obviously no longer with the Dodgers. He got traded to the Nationals in that massive Max Scherzer Trey Turner trade. By the way, I still think the Dodgers ended up doing great that trade, even with Max Scherzer ending up on a different ball club because you got Trey Turner and they dealt from strength. But yeah, Josiah Gray is a guy I think has a chance to be a solid mid-rotation starter. I don't know about anything above that, but you're talking about a number 3 and number 4. There's nothing wrong with that. I think he'll miss a lot of bats. Might be a guy who's better in fantasy than real life, to be completely honest with you, because I think you're going to get those 6-inning, 3 to 4 runs allowed, but like 9 to 10 strikeouts. And that can really help you in fantasy. It helps you in real life too. But yeah, Josiah Gray is definitely a very nice prospect. Actually, technically no longer a prospect because he exceeded his limits, but definitely a young player who I think can help more as a streamer in 2022, especially because I think the Nationals might stink. Let's see. Another insert. Riley Green. Cool little card. Definitely has some power, that's for sure. I think the hit tool might be a little bit ahead, but no question about his power. Hey, there's a really fun one. Adley Rutschman. So let's talk about Adley Rutschman for a second, because I think a lot of people are concerned about him in his first year because the track record of catchers in their first season is not great. And I get that. For every Mike Piazza, there are a lot of guys who just struggle their first year. There's a lot going on for a catcher in his first year. I think Adley Rutschman is an exception. I think now look, I don't expect him to put up the type of numbers that Mike Piazza put up ever, because Mike Piazza is maybe the greatest offensive catcher of my lifetime. Not maybe, he is the greatest offensive catcher of my lifetime. He ranks among the best catchers, period, offensively of anyone's lifetime. But Adley Rutschman has such a good approach at the plate. He can hit from both sides of the plate. There is at least plus power in his bat. It's really tough for me to see him not succeeding early on. And I get that, look, especially in catcher, if you're playing in a one catcher league, you're playing in a 10 to 12 team league. Do I think he's a top 10 to 12 catcher next year? Thinking in real time, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure if he is that. But do I think that he is at least a top 15 catcher, top 18? Yes, and a must have in two catcher leagues, an absolute must have because of that potential. If Adley Rutschman ends up not hitting for what you're looking for, you can go find another guy. But I've said this a lot. I'd rather be too early than too late, because too early just means you move on. Too late means there's nothing you can do about it. I think Adley Rutschman is going to be very, very good next year for a very bad baseball team. But I think Adley Rutschman is going to be very good next year. James Beard, don't have a lot to say other than the fact that it's a funny name and I like food. Have a lot to say. Grayson Rodriguez. Well, not a lot, because, I don't want to keep you guys here forever, but Grayson Rodriguez is probably the best pitching prospect in baseball. I have Hunter Green ranked ahead of him in fantasy because I think Hunter Green just has this chance to miss bats at a level that is crazy, just a crazy level. But I think Grayson Rodriguez has a higher floor. He's going to miss plenty of bats himself. Another guy who has a chance to be a contributor next year. I think the Orioles are really bad, but having the best overall real-life prospect, the best overall real-life pitching prospect, pretty nice consolation prize. Would prefer to have a team that wins games right now, but it's not a bad little consolation prize. Matt Manning insert. Manning really struggled. He was not good. And a guy who many people had ranked ahead of both Casey Mize and Tariq Skubble, who just wasn't successful. I'm not giving up on Matt Manning, though. This is a super athletic dude who has shown 2+ pitches and the propensity for throwing a change at a decent level. Really struggled with command. I've seen too many young pitchers struggle. Look, everybody was talking about Jose Barrios being a bust after that first season. Everybody was talking about like Casey Mize being a bust after that first season. Guys struggle in their first year. Baseball is really hard. I got question marks, and I'm not touching Matt Manning in fantasy to begin 2022. But if you're in a dynasty league and if somebody's trying to buy or whatever you want to call it, Matt Manning from you, don't just give up. He's not a throw-in any type of trade. Hey, Nick, how are you? Hope you're well as well, my friend. I've known Nick since high school. It's fun to have some people come in that I know. What did everybody think about the college football playoff thing, huh? I kind of thought Michigan deserved to be number one, not just because my podcast buddy Colin is a big Michigan supporter, but because they were too and just beat the absolute tar out of the absolute. They just destroyed Iowa. I think they're kind of number one, but I also think that they really, really, really wanted to avoid Alabama, Georgia in the semifinals. So it is what it is. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Well, Neil Cruz, a guy I've been high on for a long time and is continuing to make me look relatively competent. Did a nice job at his major league debut. Question marks long term about if a guy who is built like a small forward can be a starting shortstop, but wherever he's going to play, I think he's going to hit for average and power. So it only matters so much. Let's see, anybody else interesting here? Not really. That's okay. Again, a lot of repeats in this stuff, and I can only talk about this stuff. I can only repeat information on guys so much. Let's see. Fun one at the top, Ronnie Mauricio. Not a great 2021 season. Still a big believer, a guy who will rank in the top 75 or so of my prospect lists. Again, talent over results sometimes has to you want to see guys hit. You want to see guys perform. I just can't give up on the guy who was on his way to being a top 20 prospect just based off a couple of bad months. And that's really what it was a couple of bad months. Long term, still a big fan. Thoughts on Joey Bart next year? Big fan. Like, I think he's going to get the chance to be that starting backstop right away, and he should. I expect him to hit in that 260 to 270 range and hit 20 to 25 homers. And if he can do that, then he should rank among the top 15 or so catchers in baseball, maybe higher. It's tough to say. But yeah, I think Joey Bart is a little bit better real life prospect than fantasy prospect. Like I have obviously guys like Rutschman, and I have Keibert Ruiz ranked ahead of him as well. But I think Joey Bart is a guy who can absolutely be a very solid fantasy player next year, and long term. Especially if we're talking about card stuff, like I think he's got a chance to be a big hold for card collectors because starting catcher, San Francisco, one of the franchises that people really like to collect, high draft pick, that type of thing. I've got a lot of Joey Bart stuff that I am holding on to. Let's just say that. Hey, there's a buddy. Not a buddy, but Hunter Green. Really impressed with what he did, considering the amount of time he had off and going through the pandemic, and like everybody had to go through that stuff. But what the stuff he showed, especially early on, is what made me think he was the best prospect in that class, even with Royce Lewis being that first overall pick. Like super athletic, a fastball that doesn't have a ton of movement, but doesn't need a ton of movement if it's 102, 103 miles per hour sometimes. Like he exudes athleticism and talent. And the breaking ball continues to get better. Some work to be done, but still a very young prospect. I believe Hunter Green just turned 23. Nope, he just turned 22 in August. So he won't turn 23 until next year. Already in AAA and already throwing that hard. Always will be an injury risk when you throw that hard, but man, he's got a chance to be a stud. Here's a numbered card. This is out of 99. Carlos Rodriguez. Not the best prospect in the entire world, more of a utility type guy, but a young player. I think he just turned 21. Hey, his birthday's tomorrow. He turns 21. So a very happy early birthday to Carlos Rodriguez. Doesn't have a ton of power, but he's hit for average at every single level. So certainly an interesting guy, but I think ends up becoming that utility type guy. Justin Foskey. So Justin Foskey, I think, is a guy that I was too low on, I think, in the draft because he didn't have that standout tool. But everything is at least average. Every single thing is at least average. He is a very high floor. I wouldn't be shocked if he got a chance to make his debut this year, except for the fact that I don't know if you heard, the Rangers kind of signed a couple of middle infielders that might be blocking that guy's way. And he's not going to play third base because I think Josh Young is going to be that guy. So trade candidate maybe, but a very nice prospect who will rank near the bottom of my top 100. That is an insult. That is a compliment, excuse me, not an insult. Since the Yankees didn't go all out for free agents, does that mean arrows are pointing up for Volpe, Peraza, and Dominguez? Yes and no. I still think the Yankees might go out and go do something. Now, we'll see because we've got some time before I think anything is going to happen. I still think Carlos Correa now makes an awful lot of sense for them, even if the Yankee fans are not exactly a huge fan of that guy. Still think he makes an awful lot of sense in that organization to be that starting shortstop. Pair him with Gleyber Torres. What an unbelievably good middle infield. That being said, Volpe is probably the most improved prospect of any prospect in baseball. Went from being a guy that people like talking about, like a fringe top 100 guy, to a legitimate top 15 prospect this year. And Peraza is a very good one as well. Already reached AAA, huge speed, really good base runner. Wouldn't be shocked if he got a chance to play this year if they don't add somebody. Dominguez is still very much a long-term dude, but a freak, an absolute freak of an athlete that I think is more likely to make his debut. If you made me pick between 2023 and 2024, I'd probably pick 2024. There is work to be done for a prospect that young. I think that kind of rhymed, and I'm sorry about that. But yeah, definitely guys to keep an eye on. But I wouldn't be shocked if the Yankees were still interested in spending some quiche. Tyler Soderstrom. Catcher is loaded right now. There are some really good catching prospects in baseball right now. And Soderstrom, I think, is kind of going under the radar a little bit. Some question marks about defensively, whether he can stay at catcher, but he can hit. He can really hit and had a very solid first professional season. A guy who will be in my firmly entrenched in my top 100 for fantasy and probably should rank a little higher in real life. Definitely a guy that I'm keeping an eye on long term for sure. Let's see here. Grant Levine kind of been usurped a little bit by some of the other infield prospects that they have. But man, he came out really hot in his first professional season. I wouldn't give up on him just yet. I think he's a decent little hold. Clayton Beater, a guy that a lot of draftniks really liked, really liked. I don't really know what Clayton Beater is. Is he going to be a mid-rotation starter? Is he going to be a reliever? I could see Clayton Beater really succeeding in a Tampa Bay-esque role of being that 2 1/3 inning guy, because I think that's where his stuff plays best. But again, the Dodgers do a great job with these type of pitching profiles. But I would say that both Bobby Miller and Landon Knack are both better prospects at this point. Just something to keep an eye on. Here's another insert. Mackenzie Gore. Again, can't give up on him, but you need to change your expectations, I think. It's just baseball's hard, and I just don't know what Mackenzie Gore is going to become. I wish him the best, but it's so many mixed reports, and so many mixed reports on this guy as well. Austin Martin. I think those of you who have been following me know that I ranked him above Spencer Torkelson coming into his draft class, and I would not do that again. But I still like Austin Martin a lot, especially in fantasy, because I think he's going to steal bases. I think he's going to be a guy who provides 25 to 30 steals if he gets on base enough to do so. Real question marks about the power, but from the scouts I've talked to, it just sounds like there just needs to be a little bit of a swing change, a little bit of a change in the swing approach, and we're talking about 20 to 25 homers. Really didn't hit for power last year. So this guy hit for power, though. Jordan Walker, super interesting prospect. The one thing that's kind of interesting here is the fact that I think the Cardinals have their third baseman in Nolan Arenado, but Jordan Walker is a guy that like elite 70 plus power and really hit for average last year too. So I'm not quite willing to put him in that top 25 range just yet, but he's definitely in the top 50 and a guy that if you're a card person, Jordan Walker, if you can go get one of his cards, go get it. Let's see here. Another St. Louis prospect in Matthew Liberatore. A lot of pressure on this kid. Not really pressure, but I like to joke about the fact that, that he was involved in that Randy Arozarena trade. But legitimate stuff, usually throws his stuff for strikes. A little bit better real life than I think fantasy, but certainly a guy who I think will help the Cardinals and fantasy managers next season. This guy won't help anybody next year, but he was a pretty good player. Chipper Jones. Forgot that the Durham Bulls were a Braves organization there for a little bit. Shea Langoliers, the definition to me of a better real life prospect than a fantasy prospect, because super good defense, going to really help that run game. It's kind of funny. The Braves really struggled stopping guys from stealing bases during that World Series run. Obviously didn't impede them too much because they've got rings on their finger, but yeah, that's I just don't think he's going to hit for quite enough average to ever be a more than a catcher two. But in real life, I think he's going to help a lot. Nick, I'm sure you do need that chipper, but you're not going to get it. You're just not going to get it, my friend. Thanks again for coming out, hanging out with me. This is fun stuff. I love opening cards. Just that sound. It's such a pretty sound. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Hey, here's a guy. Spencer Torkelson. Can hit. Yeah, I mean, he can just flat out rake. And everything I saw in the Arizona Fall League, not that it would have, like, if he would have struggled, I would have knocked him down a whole bunch or anything like that. But he just confirmed that this guy's offensive upside competes with any prospect in baseball. He's a star. He has a potential to be a star. I think this guy has a potential to be Not quite a Spencer Torkelson star, but a pretty good star as well. Alec Thomas. Arizona has some really intriguing outfield prospects. I rank him as the highest because he has the highest combination of floor and ceiling. I think he can be a guy who hits 280 with 25 homers and 25 steals. And there's a lot to like about that type of profile. And I would imagine that Arizona is going to give him a chance to be that type of player to begin the year. Isaiah Green, interesting little prospect, can fly. Was involved in the trade for Francisco Lindor. Don't think I paid. I couldn't tell you much about his stats this year, but seemed like kind of an up and down year from the people that I talked to. But he can fly. Like he can really, really, really go get it in center field and can make a difference on the impacts on the bases. This guy's a lot better than what we were talking about. Elvis Martinez, and I think this is one of the reasons why Toronto could make that Austin Martin trade for Jose Barrios, because they are just loaded up the middle with shortstop prospects and second base prospects and guys who could move to third base. And Elvis Martinez might need to make that move to third base, but his offensive upside is palpable. Like the ball just jumps off this dude's bat. And I get good reports about the baseball acumen. Again, chance he might have to move over to third. That's true about a lot of shortstop prospects, but firmly entrenched in my top 60 prospects for the next year. A guy I like a lot. This is a guy I like a lot more in fantasy than in real life. This is Casey Barton. And the reason is because he has that power speed combination. Like he has elite athleticism, and he can, when he makes contact with the baseball, it can go very far. The question mark is how much he can make contact with the baseball. And that's the reason why he fell, I believe, to like the late second round. I can look here and make sure that I'm talking right. No, he actually fell to the third round, which I think was really good value for a player like that. Very mediocre first professional season, but the upside is legitimate. Definitely a buy low candidate in fantasy if you're into that sort of thing. All right, about 5 more packs to go. It's nice that this will work out to almost exactly an hour, which is perfect. Not too long, not too short. Gave me something to do. Heading to the mail just after this because I got to ship some stuff out for some charity stuff that we've done. Check out my Twitter, by the way, Crawford_MILB. I've got a Juan Marichal card that I'm auctioning off for charity right now. So if that's something that you're interested in, take a look. Let's see, Dylan Dingler. So Dylan Dingler shows really good speed still. He didn't show it on the bases at all. So kind of knocking him down fantasy a little bit because a catcher that can run is a very intriguing thing. It's why Dalton Varsho is a guy that everybody's going to be infatuated to be when this season begins, hopefully soon. But he has the athleticism to be a 15 to 20 steal guy. Even without that, he's still intriguing because I think he can hit for power. Might be a decent run producer in a Detroit lineup that has a chance to be really good and should have no problem staying behind the plate. But if those steals come, and that's why I'm investing in him in deeper dynasty leagues, because if he does have that chance, if he does have that opportunity to steal bases, he has the speed to do it. JJ Leblade, really weird 2021 season, and by weird I mean kind of bad, disappointing for a guy who was drafted with like a top 5 or top 6 pick, something around that range out of Vanderbilt. Looked good in the Arizona Fall League, though, from the reports I got in my limited look at him. So definitely not a guy I'm giving up on, but certainly a guy who saw his stock slide. I was actually lower on Blade than the industry was, even in coming into the season. So but definitely a name to keep an eye on. Ed Howard of the Cubs. I was too high on Ed Howard. Just being completely honest with you. I thought that the average and the speed were going to start playing pretty much immediately. I really, really, really liked that swing. Didn't show it in 2021. But so no longer a top 100 prospect, no longer a guy I'm ranking above some of the other shortstop prospects, but still an interesting prospect and a guy who's still super young. So a hold in dynasty and deeper dynasty leagues, but I was probably too high on him. I think I was just about right on this guy. Nolan Gorman of the Cardinals. I still am a little skeptical about the second base thing, but I got some really good reports there for a guy who has almost no experience playing that position, and the power is legit. And I think he's going to hit for higher average than a lot of people thought as well. So definitely an intriguing guy there for sure. All right, we got, I think, 4 more packs left. I think we're still missing one auto. Our autos haven't been great so far, if I'm being honest with you. The Casey auto was nice. Casey auto was nice. Here's a fun one. Jaren Duran struggled like a lot of young players struggled at the majors last year. Still very much a believer. Will rank in my top 30 or so prospects for next year. Not just for next year. He'll rank much higher than that for the list. He'll rank as a top 30 overall prospect. I think he's going to hit for average, hit for power, and steal a lot of bases. Some defensive question marks, which is kind of weird for somebody as athletic as him, but definitely a guy to keep an eye on. Riley Green, who we talked about earlier. Let's see. Anybody else that we haven't talked about here? Nope. All right. Well, we still got 5 packs to go. These packs are thin. They are very misleading packs. I think our auto might be in this one. Nope. JT Ginn, a guy who would have been a high first-round pick if he would have stayed healthy, but underwent Tommy John, starting to get healthy. People like to make fun of the Mets, but they've done a very good job with prospects like this before. Oh, here's our auto. William Holmes. Oh, helps if you hold the card the right way. William Holmes. A reliever prospect to me. Turns 21 near the end of December. Kid out of Tennessee. Probably a middle reliever guy, maybe a back end starter if everything works out. But yeah, I don't see star potential from him, which, it happens. I like this guy a lot. Landon Knack. So this is a guy who came out of mid-Tennessee State and just pounded the strike zone, and he continued to do it as a professional. Maybe a little bit better real life than fantasy guy, but very hard for me to see him not being at least a back-end starter. Chance to be a mid-rotation guy. Patrick Bailey kind of gets lost in the shuffle because there are so many quality catching prospects. Still think Joey Bart is the future there, but I think Patrick Bailey has a chance to be a starter for somebody. Anybody else interesting here? All repeats. So those are 4 autos, but, not elite stuff by any stretch of the imagination, but at the same time, they're young prospect autographs, and I think the cards look really good. Nick York, a guy who is probably going to make my top 100 list. Some real made people shake their heads why this guy went so high. It's because he can flat out swing the baseball bat. He can hit for average, a little more power than I expected as well. Probably a 2023 play, but I do think he's that future second baseman of the future for them. This is a guy who really disappointed this year in Drew Waters. I mean, I knew he had contact issues, but I thought he was going to make enough hard contact for that not to matter. Oh, it mattered. He really struggled in AAA. A guy that, still has a chance to be a starting outfielder, but nowhere close to the top 25, top 30 prospect that I thought he was. First thing I've ever gotten wrong in my entire life. Well, that's a really pretty card. And Pedro Martinez for the Missions. That must be San Antonio. Doesn't say. Yep, San Antonio Missions. That's really cool. I like that a lot. Best pitcher I ever saw, and I saw some really good ones because I'm old as heck. But when he was at his best, I've never seen a pitcher better than Pedro Martinez. All right, now 3 more to go. One on the back that a guy I like to talk about. Right, this guy's not as fun to talk about. Forrest Whitley was the best pitching prospect in baseball at this point 2 years ago, maybe 3. You just don't know what you're going to get from him. I wish him luck, but But the amount of time off and the fact that he just flat out couldn't throw strikes the last time he was on the mound, a lot of pause for him. Lot of pause. With another fun insert. Get this guy in the Hall of Fame. Andrew Jones is a Hall of Famer, gosh dang it. It's not even close to me. Like that, the power and the defense he played. Get him in. Get him in the Hall of Fame, please and thank you. And somebody fix it and get Kenny Lofton in the Hall of Fame someday too, by the way. Then Jordan Groshans. So a guy who missed some time, is not the same type of prospect that we saw before his injuries, but I think he's going to be a starting third baseman, and I think it might be a guy that we see start playing next year. Really do. Really do. Really like his swing. Solid defender at third base. It would not be a shock to me at all if he got that chance to play immediately. So definitely looking to introduce Jordan Groshans to my fantasy lineup, especially in dynasty leagues next year. Let's see. Robert Hassel, a guy who went ahead of Zach Veen, and I thought that was kind of cuckoo, but I get it now. Like, power is legit, going to hit for some average, really strong throwing arm, a guy who pitched in high school. I could see him being a middle of the order bat someday. Same thing for Zach Veen too, but definitely a guy that I'm looking to acquire. Nick Lodolo, he might be it's very similar to me with Reed Detmers. I think he's going to be a very strong mid-rotation starter, very high floor. He struck out a lot of dudes in the minors. I think it's more about deception and about, not deception, excuse me, more about ability to locate than it is about pure stuff. And don't get me wrong, that's great. It's necessary to be successful. But I'm always skeptical of guys who miss bats based on command more than stuff, in terms of fantasy anyway. And I think that's what Nick Lodolo kind of is. Anybody else here that we haven't talked about? Nope. All right, last pack. Talks about him. Another Spencer Torkelson. That's just a really pretty card. It's not a rookie. It's not a first Bowman. It's not anything like that. But it's just a really pretty card. And it's centered really well. And I love the look of these cards. I really do. And I'm not being paid anything to tell anyone about that. I promise you that. I wish I was. Brennan Davis. So he's probably just a notch below Riley Green for me. He'd be the third best outfield prospect. I've talked about this ad nauseum, but way too low on Brennan Davis coming out of that draft. Think the Cubs are going to give him a chance this year. Think he's going to hit for average, steal some bases, and hit for some power as well. Very, very good prospect. A chance to be a legitimate star someday. And I can't say that about a lot of prospects. Another fun one. This is a really cool pack. CJ Abrams. Again, that's dang inverted. CJ Abrams. So before the injury, he was a top 5 prospect. Now he's probably a top 10 prospect. Wish I would have gotten a chance to see him play in the Arizona Fall League. Just the fact that he's working out now is a very positive thing after that injury. Superstar potential to hit for average, steal a ton of bases, easy 80 grade speed on the 2080 scale. May move to the outfield at some point, but maybe he's the shortstop of the future, and Fernando Tatis is going to be a legitimate outfielder. Either way, it's a good problem to have, and those two at the top of the lineup have fun pitchers. Have fun. And let's see here. A fun one to end on. Josh, a guy a lot of people I think we're calling Jung, but it's Young. Flat out hit. Like, doesn't have that power that you typically see from a top 100 third base prospect. You know, usually you're talking about guys who have the chance to hit 25 to 30 homers. I think he's more in that 15 to 20 range, but has a better chance to hit for average than those guys. I think 280, 290, 300 seasons are well within reason. I think that the Rangers are going to give him a chance to be that third baseman early next year. He'll rank very high, not only on my top 100 list, but of my prospect list overall. So yeah, Josh Jung, I did it myself. Josh Young, a definite hold, a guy who I think has a very bright future. Well, thank you guys for coming out. That was a lot of fun. Got a chance to talk to you about some prospects, open some cards, answer some of your questions. We'll probably do this again in a couple of weeks. Thank you guys so much. We know that this lockout isn't a lot of fun for anybody right now, but we're going to be giving you lots of great content over these next few months, whether you like it or not. And I think you like it. So thanks again, everybody. Stay safe, and we will see you next time.